Okay, so it's no secret that President Trump ordered airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites last night, and this has been met with a lot of backlash and reaction that has come in today. We're talking about people calling for his impeachment. They say that his decision was unconstitutional. People are worried about the Strait of Hormuz being closed and much more. We're going to cover it all, show you what both sides are saying, deliver the facts, and then give you the bottom line.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Okay, so that was President Trump addressing the nation last night after he authorized military strikes against Iran's nuclear sites. He called it a spectacular success, but that's not even the story, ladies and gentlemen. It's the reactions that are rolling in. We got people calling for the impeachment. They say that President Trump violated the Constitution. You have people who did support the decision, celebrated the military, and everything else in between. We'll take a look at all of that, of course. But first, where we're going to start is with ground news, because already media outlets are coming up with some crazy headlines. And the reason why we want to point this out to you is because we want you to be able to do your own research. But if you guys want to be able to do your own research, and I believe Ground News will help you do that, so just go to ground.news/Devori to follow along here. And let's start off with one media outlet that leans left, and that is USA Today. They say that Trump just bombed Iran. We deserve to know why, but don't count on the truth. Why is that? Because President Donald Trump may have just hurled America into war because he was mad nobody liked his recent military parade. How did we go from a military parade to military strikes in Iran? This is what the media loves to do, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why you're seeing Democrats hop on that same delusional take by saying that what the president has been doing is unconstitutional. Take a listen to this clip.
This was not constitutional, was not lawful in the absence of a declaration by Congress. And so the administration should have come to Congress. We will have a vote on a war powers resolution. But there's a reason to bring this to Congress, and it is you want the Congress bought in. You want the American people bought in on an action this substantial that could lead to a major outbreak of war.
Okay, that's just one of many clips where people are coming out claiming that President Trump's decision is unconstitutional. He did it without Congress approval. I'm going to show you exactly what the facts are surrounding that. But first, look at how the right reports on what happened yesterday. Okay, this is Ground News. The Epoch Times says, U.S. destroys critical Iranian nuclear facilities. That's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. No spin. None of this, oh, he did it because nobody showed up to his military parade. That's a perfect example of what's wrong with media outlets today. And why you got to be able to do your own research and see it for yourself. Don't take people's word for it, especially this story in this video. So many reactions could leave you confused. And that's why we recommend you use a tool like Ground News to help you do your own research. So if you want to use this tool for yourself, all you have to do is go to ground.news/Devori, or you could download the mobile app. Just use promo code Devori, and it's going to give you access to everything that I showed you in this video, including 40% off the Vantage.
Some U.S. lawmakers got word in advance about the strikes on Iran, but the notification went along party lines. Sources say Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune got the early notice. The same applies to the top Republicans on the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees. But their Democratic counterparts were informed later, despite the fact that they all are usually briefed on major military engagements. Well, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is now demanding answers about the strikes from President Trump. Both chambers are expected to vote in the coming days on the limits of his war powers.
Yeah, so just a couple things. You got mainstream media who's already lying about what happened. I just showed you that from USA Today. Now you've got Democrats, congressional leaders calling for the impeachment of President Trump. And part of it is because, as you just heard in that last clip, he spoke with Republican leaders before he spoke with Democrat leaders. Some people believe he did that to prevent leaks from taking place because we know currently right now, Democrats cannot help themselves. They are against the president 100% of the time. To prove our point, here is AOC posting this late last night. The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. It is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not grounds for impeachment. I will show you the actual law here shortly, but I have to show you one more clip. This is from Ro Khanna repeating the same talking point that this was unconstitutional. Take a listen.
Congressman, your reaction to both the strikes themselves and Donald Trump's address to the nation shortly after.
Well, first of all, the strikes were unconstitutional. We can't just go bomb another country in Iran without congressional authorization. And this is why Representative Massey, a Republican, and I have a war powers resolution in the House of Representatives. Senator Kaine has a war powers resolution in the Senate. On Monday, both the Senate and the House could have a vote on this resolution.
Okay, so let's just understand why Democrats are calling President Trump's decision unconstitutional. It's based on the war powers resolution. And it says this: the constitutional powers of the president as commander-in-chief to introduce United States armed forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances are exercised only pursuant to, number one, a declaration of war, number two, specific statutory authorization, or number three, a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. So the question is, how can a president order precise military strikes upon foreign adversaries? Well, it's because of the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, where it says the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. That is clearly vague, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? That's why the president, particularly the executive branch, has depended on this in order to carry out military strikes without needing congressional approval. In fact, as long as they notified the House of Representatives and the leader of the Senate, they're good. And that's exactly what President Trump did. But Bernie Sanders did not agree as soon as he read the statement from the president last night. Take a look at this.
This is a statement from Donald Trump, quote, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran," etc. And I want to tell you something. Not only is this news that I've just heard this second alarming, that all of you have just heard, but it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
Okay, I'm showing you these clips from Democrats so you get an understanding of what their strategy is right now, which is to claim that this is unconstitutional and to pass an amendment to the current war powers resolution that would prevent President Trump from doing this again. But there's only one problem. The Supreme Court has never ruled on this exact conflict. What is the conflict? Well, does the war powers resolution supersede the U.S. Constitution? Does the U.S. Constitution supersede the war powers resolution? Did you guys know the Supreme Court has never ruled on this? So it's interesting if they will be able to do that, because I assume that this might go to the Supreme Court given the current climate of this administration, how everything President Trump has been doing has been challenged legally. But the fact still remains, he is not the only president to exercise military strikes. Think of Obama and the amount of bombs that were dropped during his heyday. There's no comparison there. Now, let's get back to the other important question. What will happen if Iran decides to retaliate? Take a listen to what Pete Hegseth had to say.
What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces.
Okay, so obviously the Secretary of Defense did not answer that question, and for good reason. That's a hypothetical. He's not going to do that right now because we don't know what Iran is going to do right now until they do it. But they do have generally three options. Option one, continue to attack Israel. Option two, come to the table and formulate an agreement with the United States of America that includes that you guys will stop your uranium enrichment program in its tracks. Or option three, they attack U.S. armed forces, and we know what happens from there. Now, let's hear from Marco Rubio and what he believes will happen if Iran decides to attack our U.S. armed forces. Take a listen.
Have you heard from anyone in Iran, and are you expecting retaliation?
Well, if they retaliate, it'll be the worst mistake they've ever made. Look, we can fly in and out of Iran at will. We went in last night. The president sent our military forces from halfway across the world, went in, conducted this operation, left. Not a shot was fired against us. They didn't even know what had happened. By the time we left, the planes were out of their airspace before they finally started realizing they'd been hit. So it would be a terrible mistake if Iran retaliates. But that's not our goal. We are not declaring war on Iran. We're not looking for war on Iran. But if they attack us, then I think we have capabilities they haven't even seen yet. It would be a terrible mistake on their part. And frankly, it's not what we hope for or wish. What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. If what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have, they can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They disappeared for 10 days. And now, the president had to take action as a response.
Now, in case you haven't seen this, these are photos that have been circling on social media showing exactly where the bombs were dropped. And what is being reported is they were dropped in these ventilation buildings, okay? Because obviously, if something is underground, there needs to be air that is getting there, and there has to be a ventilation system. So that's where the bombs were entered, as you guys can see here. And again, the question is, how do we know that Iran's nuclear site has been obliterated? Technically, we don't know. We just have to go based on what the president has told us and any other official is telling us, but we're not there. We wouldn't know. We can't get into the tunnel, right? Now, here is what the vice president also had to say about Iran and if they do decide to retaliate. Take a listen.
If you look at what we did yesterday, John, we did not attack the nation of Iran. We did not attack any civilian targets. We didn't even attack military targets outside of the 3 nuclear weapons facilities that we thought were important to accomplish our goal of preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. So how Iran responds, I think, is ultimately the ball is in their court. But if you look at what we did, it was very precise, very narrowly tailored to our objective. And if the Iranians decide to expand this, then that's ultimately their decision, and the President of the United States will respond in kind.
Okay, so I think it's abundantly clear how the administration feels. If Iran decides to retaliate against U.S. armed forces, it wouldn't be good. And if it led to that, I'm still unclear if Congress has to actually approve a military airstrike in response. Because even if they retaliate, does that mean that is a declaration of war? And the reason why I ask that is what the Houthis were doing. Was that a declaration of war? Or was that just, hey, they attacked our armed forces, Secretary of Defense, please address that? And he has the authority to do so. These are questions that obviously will need to be answered in the coming weeks. Now, let's go to John Bolton, because we know this guy's doing jumping jacks. I mean, he's probably been up all night long just salivating over this decision from President Trump. But he says something that warrants our attention, and I want you to hear it for yourself. Take a listen.
Were you surprised that President Trump took such decisive action?
Well, let me say this unequivocally. I think President Trump made the right decision for America to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I think we're on the verge of potentially seeing regime change in Iran as part of that. I think this is a huge change in the Middle East. It was a decisive action. It was the right thing to do. I thought somebody should do it for a long time, but better late than never.
So let's be honest. The fact that John Bolton is celebrating this, I'm sure, makes some conservatives uneasy because we know he loves war. But let's not get it twisted. A military airstrike is not a declaration of war. Now, President Trump was attacking civilians. He went into Tehran and he started attacking military bases and all this other stuff. Yeah, that would be a declaration of war. But a precision strike on 3 nuclear sites, I wouldn't call that a declaration of war. That's just my own personal opinion. Now, John Bolton, which actually caught people's attention, he started saying the classical words, regime change. And guess what the administration's been doing since President Trump carried out this airstrike? They have been fiercely rebuking that type of language and claiming that this has nothing to do with a regime change. First example is from Pete Hegseth himself. Take a listen.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
But our view has been very clear that we don't want a regime change. We do not want to protract this or build this out any more than it's already been built out. We want to end their nuclear program, and then we want to talk to the Iranians about a long-term settlement here.
But that sounds like we're headed towards regime change, or the desire to get these people out of power.
No.
Are you?
No, a serious foreign policy is one that's focused on identifying what our national interest is. You don't have to like the regime. There are a lot of regimes around the world that we don't like, okay? But in this particular case, what we are focused on is not the changing of the regime. Okay, that's up to the Iranian people if they want to do that, but that's not what we're focused on. Our national interest is about one thing, and that is Iran not getting anywhere near the capability to weaponize and have nuclear weapons. They're not going to get anywhere near that capability.
Okay, so now that we've taken care of that regime change narrative, we clearly see the administration's not interested in that. In fact, they want this to be a one and done situation like Soleimani, okay? Go out there, take out the threat, and just move on, okay? Now let's get to some more breaking news that is actually disturbing. According to Iran's parliament, they have officially approved closing the Strait of Hormuz for the first time since 1972. If approved by Iran's top security body, shipments of 20+ million barrels of oil per day will be impacted. And of course, that impacts the price of crude oil, which would cause gas prices here in America to skyrocket. And the disturbing thing is from JP Morgan, which estimates that a closure of that strait could send oil prices to $120 to $130 a barrel. This would imply a spike in U.S. CPI inflation to 5%. And the last time we saw U.S. inflation at 5% was in March of 2023 when the Fed was aggressively hiking rates. Now, pump the brakes, don't panic, because this hasn't happened yet. They still need to approve the closure. They voted to do it, but the security body needs to approve it. Now, let's hear what Marco Rubio had to say in response to this development. Take a listen.
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. So, look, they're going to say what they need to say. You know, these are the things that need to happen for their own internal politics and so forth. But in the end, we're going to judge them by the actions that they take moving forward. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force. And that was the point of this mission. And that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate. We're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous. We have responses available that are devastating.
Okay, so the better question that we need to answer is at the gas pump, the prices that you will see, will those go up if the strait is closed? Number one, the answer is going to be no. You know why? Because Iran does not have the capability to close that strait without getting into a war or at least experiencing U.S. armed forces that would retaliate and make sure that it stays open. That's number one. Number two, we're in a dominant position energy-wise. We don't really depend on oil and gas like we used to from 20 and 30 years ago. So could we see a disruption in the market? Absolutely we could. Will it be a long-term disruption? Probably not. But again, a lot of this is speculation and hypotheticals because they have not closed it. So let's back up and just assess the negative consequences of this decision from the president. One, the strait could be closed, which would definitely trigger a war or U.S. armed forces having to get involved in order to keep it open. It would disrupt the market, prices could potentially go up. Number two, obviously we could get dragged into the war, right? I mean, that is a negative consequence. And number three, which is the clip I'm about to show you now, is from Tom Homan. We know due to Biden's incompetence and malpractice on the job, he allowed everybody to come across the border. So the question is, how serious should we be taking sleeper cells in our country? Well, here's what Tom Homan had to say. Take a listen.
Can you assess that issue particularly? How many Iranians are in the country that are in sleeper cells trying to do bad to America right now?
Well, look, you and I have talked about this many times. I said the last 4 years, my biggest concern was this open border was the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. So I pulled numbers this morning just from a CBP under Joe Biden. There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. And you compare that to the Trump administration, zero. Right, zero releases. And right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime, most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. That was President Trump's big win on securing this nation. So we're not releasing people in this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away, because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis that Biden created that over 2 million people crossed the border and got away. That is my biggest concern, and that's what created the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen.
Yeah, so clearly it is a problem. It warrants the FBI's attention. I pray that not only the FBI, but local law enforcement, they are alert and they are in a position to respond accordingly if something does happen. At this point, nothing has happened or been reported, and so it remains to be seen. Now, I guess the better question is, should you be scared? Absolutely not, okay? But let's not kid ourselves. We don't know who crossed the border under Joe Biden. So regardless of this decision from President Trump, we always had this national security threat in our country because of Joe Biden. Now, let's go to the next issue that's come up. There's a lot of people on social media surprised that President Trump made this decision, and they are criticizing the president. And in some cases, they're saying, this is the last straw for me. I no longer will support the president. I'm not going to vote Democrat. That's what you're saying. And of course, this is what Scott Jennings had to say in response to those people. Take a listen.
Why would you be surprised? I mean, Donald Trump has been clear-eyed and full of resolve about the Iranian threat for 20 years. He has always said you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. And I would also say that my observations of him over the last few months are that things are running quite smoothly over in the White House and at the Pentagon. Look what happened. The deception that was involved here, no leaks, the resolve, the precision, execution. We have a commander-in-chief right now who is decisive and who knows how to operate a government and operate a military operation with absolute precision. The level of deterrence that this will put throughout the world that our enemies should be perceiving is very, very high. This is a great day for this president, and it's a great day for the world because he's making us safe for Western civilization.
Okay, so that take from Scott Jennings sums up exactly how people feel who support the decision 100%. No question about it. They don't question the intelligence. They believe exactly what President Trump did was the right thing to do. Of course, when you're looking at people on the left, as I showed you throughout this video, they believe the president should be impeached, it was unconstitutional, etc. But there's only one problem, which I'm about to show you in this next clip. As soon as they go down the road of claiming that what President Trump is doing is wrong, they start to show how hypocritical they can be and how there's a double standard, and in some cases, how they contradict themselves with that very statement, given what happened with prior presidents. And so here is an example of that in this clip. Take a look.
I think that there are a lot of questions that are being raised by Congress right now. And the reason that they're being raised is because normally you would need congressional approval for something like this. And I know that my friend here is laughing a little bit, but I will say,
I mean, as someone who's covered Congress for a long time, but they gave a lot of that away.
But I will say, I mean, in order for the president to take action without congressional approval, he needed to show that there was a real true threat to the United States and that the strike would not cause escalation. The problem with this is that normally you would have a group of lawyers from all across the agencies that actually would make these determinations. Trump did away with that at the beginning of this administration. So it's unclear what type of legal advice Trump was getting. The Department of Defense usually puts out a statement and says what the legality is of any strike that the president is taking without congressional action. Here, we have not heard from DOD what is happening there. So what will be critical in the weeks to come is Congress must see the underlying intelligence about how they were in direct threat and how the U.S. needed to respond without congressional approval. But as of right now, I have not seen that.
You're arguing that after 46 years of the Iranian regime killing Americans, threatening Americans, saying over and over and over again, death to America, that maybe they were just didn't mean it, that they're fiery but mostly peaceful Iranian butchers? I mean, I don't understand. This is a righteous struggle.
But what you have the last
not
word.
exactly the
Well,
Yeah, and Scott Jennings reminds her of what the president said in his address to the nation. He did reference that Iran is guilty at attacking U.S. armed forces, and we never actually dealt with it until last night. And so will that be enough for Congress? We're going to find out here. But I'll tell you what, in regards to this entire video, you got all these reactions rolling in. It's not for me to tell you how to think. You make up your own mind, but just make sure you do something for me. You look at the facts, you review all the information, bring up the U.S. Constitution, bring up the War Powers Resolution, look at historical context, look at what other prior presidents have done, and then come to your conclusion after that. And if you can do that, I'm pretty sure you would come up with a reasonable conclusion about what happened last night. And so mine is very clear. If the intelligence is correct, this was the right decision from the president. No question. I don't believe it's unconstitutional. And for the record, if they want it to be unconstitutional, they need to get the Supreme Court involved and to rule on that fact. So let's hear from you guys in the comments section below. You guys, maybe you joined me live last night, maybe you didn't. But after you've seen all the reactions from today, what are your thoughts? How do you feel today? Do you believe that this was the right decision from the president? Let me know in the comments section below. Now, yesterday, it was reported that Mr. Khalil, the person who graduated from Columbia University and also has ties to terrorist organizations, was released from custody. Okay. It all is due to a district court judge ruling in his favor. In fact, overruled an immigration judge that ordered Mr. Khalil to be deported. Well, if you missed out on that story and more from yesterday, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.